Good morning. Today's talk for the day is a kind of a work in progress because I was just putting it together, and as I was putting it together, I realised I kind of missed the point. So we'll see how it goes. It all started from me watching a show on the TV, and it was about the universe and how it's formed. Now, you probably think I'm always talking about the universe, preoccupation with the universe. It does fascinate me, I must confess. Anyway, I was watching this show, and it was talking about various things, but it asked the question right at the beginning of the show, that when we look up to the night sky, why isn't it all light? Why is it dark? Now you think to yourself, that's kind of a weird question. And I thought it was a weird question too, so I persevered with the show to listen to what actually, what's the point? What kind of question is that? Should the night sky be light? And why isn't it? And the show that went into other things, primarily dealing with the changes in our understanding of the universe. That how it just keeps on getting bigger, if you like. It was talking about, it's a new science. Looking at the universe as a new science. Prior to Galileo coming along, it was pretty much astronomy and astrology were just the same. They weren't two separate things. So, but when Galileo came along, he started to look at the night sky. He started to track where the stars went and the moving across them. And he started to discover stuff that we didn't previously know. And he found some astounding things. Now, prior to him, there was a lot of, there was hundreds of reasons people gave for stars in the sky. Some of the more charming ones were, one, every star was actually an angel, guardian angel, looking down upon the earth, which is nice. And another one was, which my particular favourite one, this is from Central Africa, that they believe that stars are pinpricks in the sky, letting tomorrow show through. I mean, it's really charming, it's really lovely. Nonsense, of course, but it's nice. It's a lovely thing. But Galileo came along and he squashed all that, and he started a revolution. And it wasn't to everybody's taste. The church in particular wasn't at all keen on what Galileo had to say, and his predecessors from then, they were coming up with all sorts of stuff. And suddenly coming up with this idea that this wasn't God at all. The earth isn't at the centre of the universe. It's just a huge, great big expanse which goes on and on and on. And the more we're looking now, in Galileo's day, the universe was relatively small. The known universe was relatively small compared to what we know of the universe today. Today the universe is vast. In fact, there's even a thought that it's not just vast, it goes on eternally. There is no end to the universe. It doesn't have edges. It just is. Which is a remarkable thought. And when I was thinking about all of that, I got to thinking about another thing which is often troubled me. And that is, why did God make all of that if he was only interested in the earth and us on it? So, to kind of put it in some perspective, why did God create the entire Sahara Desert if he was only interested in one grain of sand? And the more I think about that, the more it troubled me. But as I was watching this show and I was listening to this, and I got to thinking to myself, well, God caused the Big Bang. Now, you won't find that statement in any scientific journals, that God caused the Big Bang. But if there was a Big Bang, then God caused it. In my mind, anyway, that's all there is to it. And the universe as we understand it was formed. And it's still forming, it's still growing, it's still getting further apart. I mean, I'm thinking to myself, why did he do that? What was his purpose? Then we get back to the question at the very beginning of the TV show. Why isn't the night sky all white? And the explanation they gave is, imagine yourself in a really dense forest at night, and you have a torch, and you're shining the torch around like that. At no time ever will your beam not sit on a tree. It might go between two trees, but there'll be another tree there. It might go in between, there'll be another tree there. Your light beam will always hit against the tree. Now, if there is so many stars, and when we're talking so many, we're talking billions of stars, then, and they're all stars, which means they're all like our sun, a great big blazing ball, and there's so many of them, why isn't the sky just continuously light when we look up at night? Why is there gaps? And the answer is, at first, simple, but not really all that simple. The reason there's gaps is that some of them are really far away. Now that doesn't mean that we won't see them, or that doesn't mean that someday we won't see them one day, because they won't. The reason we haven't seen them yet is that the light from those stars hasn't reached us. Even though they were formed billions of years ago, they haven't yet reached where we are. It's still, the light's still speeding along at the speed of light, hurtling towards us, but it could be millions and millions and millions of years before it actually even reaches us. Now this is what God created. And what can we take from that? I'll tell you what I took from that. I'll tell you what, and a revelation to me answered my query about the grain of sand. You know, whenever you're reading through the Bible, we see a lot about letting your light shine. We read scriptures about how even the smallest candle can light a darkened room. Even from miles away, you can see a candle in the window. It's almost as if God created this massive, awesome, wonderful universe to remind us that our lights need to shine. We live in a dark, dark world. Everywhere you look, we see darkness, we see hopelessness, we just see such need. And we need lights in that universe. And we, God's people, we're the lights. Now we can say to ourselves, well, as soon as the light gets in, as soon as the universe is complete, then we can show our lights. But that's not the way God works, because there's lights everywhere. They're already shining. And that's our responsibility. It's not even responsibility. That's our great pleasure and privilege we've been given for our lights to shine in this world of darkness. People are looking for hope. Where do they look? Well, they'll look where they see a light, where they see a little light in the darkness. They'll look there. So, let's be that light.
Morning, y'all. Good to see everybody in church on a cold January Sunday. It's freezing here. Today is the second Sunday after Epiphany. We believe that Christmas was almost a month ago. 2019 is kind of rushing by, isn't it? I was thinking about Christmas this week, and this past Christmas was a little bit different for me. I did one particular thing a little bit different. In the past, whenever anybody has asked me, what can I get you for Christmas, or what do you need, whether family or friends, what do you want for Christmas? What can I get you? Instead of responding with, as I have done in the past, who can get me anything? Just anything you want will be fine. It's the thought that counts. I appreciate you thinking of me. This year, I told them, socks. Since we moved in March of last year, we walk a lot more. And within a few months, I noticed that lots of my favorite socks that I've had for a long time had holes in the heels or the toes. So I told everyone who asked just what I wanted. I said socks. And not just any socks. I've done that before, and that's resulted in a drawer full of boring, solid colored gray or black or brown socks. I told them I wasn't going to let that happen. I was not leaving anything to chance. So I told them I like happy socks. It's a brand, Happy Socks. Or ones that look like them. Crazy patterns and colors, the crazier the better. I said, I like knowing that underneath this all-black uniform, there's a little whimsy under there. So, all totaled up this year, from my family and friends for Christmas, I got over 20 pairs of socks. And not one boring pair of gray or brown or navy. Navy's the worst. Not one of them in the bunch. I got 20 pairs of ones that look basically like these. And these are kind of mine. There's polka dots and stripes and all sorts of patterns. But it's a good feeling to know that you got a gift that you will really use. Have you ever gotten one of those gifts that you just use every single day and it makes you happy every time you use it? That's the kind of gift that you like to get and to give. Have you ever given anybody something and maybe they put it on the shelf? Maybe they leave it in the original packaging. Maybe they say something like, well, I don't want to wear it out. I want to keep, I want to keep it new. And you think, kind of makes you feel sad. Well, why did I give it to you if you're not going to use it? I gave it to you because I thought you would actually use that olive pitter or garlic press or whatever it is. You feel kind of sad. You thought it would bring them and others joy. An unused gift is really a sad thing. One of the lectionary readings for today is from Paul's first epistle to the church at Corinth. It's from 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verses 1 through 11. Now, Corinth, this city that Paul is writing to, was a big, bustling Roman city. It had lots of cultural and religious influences. There were Jews there were polytheists, Greek and Roman worshipers and citizens and freedmen and slaves as well. And there were temples all over Corinth to the Greek and Roman gods like Poseidon and Apollo and Aphrodite and Asclepius, the god of medicine. And in that environment, in that bustling, multicultural, multi-religious, polytheistic environment, there's a new Christian church struggling to figure out who they were. And at the time, they really didn't know what a Christian church was supposed to look like. In fact, they didn't even know what Christianity really was. There were no approved guidelines. There was no historical example of what a Christian church looked like. There was no manual to follow like we have in the Church of the Nazarene. It has all the rules and how you do things. But if the amount of space that Paul uses in his letter, that he takes up, the amount of time he takes up talking about one issue, is any indication, the church at Corinth, this new church at Corinth, was really interested in what we call spiritual gifts. And in particular, one spiritual gift. That is the gift of tongues. Now, this could mean the gift of speaking in other languages, known languages that people speak. Or it could mean something that we call glossolalia, which is kind of an ecstatic uttering of sounds, at least, even though they're not known words, that's not recognizable as a language. And it seems that in his letter to the Corinthians, Paul refers to both, because he says, if I speak in the tongues of men and of angels, but I have not love, I'm a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. But Paul goes to some lengths to let the Corinthian church know that tongues are not the only gift of the Spirit, nor are they the most important one. So here in chapter 12, Paul writes, now, concerning spiritual gifts, brothers and sisters, I do not want you to be misinformed. You know that when you were pagans, you were enticed and led astray to idols that could not speak. Therefore, I want you to understand that no one speaking by the Spirit of God ever says, Jesus be cursed, and no one can say Jesus is Lord except by the Holy Spirit. So let's walk through this. Paul says he doesn't want the Corinthian church to be uninformed, to be ignorant about, the word he uses is pneumaticon. It's translated as spiritual gifts, but really that word gifts isn't there. It really just means spiritual stuff. Pneumaticon means the spiritual, things that are spiritual, stuff associated with the Spirit. The Greek word is pneuma. It's also the word for wind and breath and spirit that inspires us. Inspiration means to breathe in. And so we inspire the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit fills us and moves inside and outside us like the wind, the air that we breathe. And Paul does make sure that the church at Corinth is not uninformed. In fact, he spends all of chapter 12 discussing how spiritual gifts work and what they are. And he begins by referring to a very specific situation. He says, "You know that when you were pagans, you were enticed and led astray to idols that could not speak." So Paul is referring to that polytheism in the Greek and Roman world. Remember, at Corinth, there were temples to different gods, and people would visit them. They could, for instance, frequent the temple prostitutes at the temple of Aphrodite, and she was the protector of the city of Corinth if they wanted to, and she protected it was believed she protected the economy. And if, after visiting the prostitutes there, they got a sexually transmitted disease, they could visit the temple of Asclepius, the god of medicine, and leave a sacrifice in hopes that that would heal them. It probably wouldn't work, but they could try. Now, if all of that sort of polytheism, all of these temples seems kind of primitive and foreign, I think a pretty good case can be made that in this big, modern, bustling city of lots of multicultural influences, there are still temples to the idols of this world that people serve just as religiously as the people of Corinth. There are temples to the idols of materialism, of commercialism, of sports, of celebrity, of business, of money, where people try to find meaning for their lives religiously. But at any rate, Paul is making the point that these gods are nothing more than idols who cannot speak. And unlike these silent Corinthian idols, Poseidon and Aphrodite and Apollo and Asclepius, the Holy Spirit, the one God, talking about monotheism, one God, in contradiction to polytheism of Corinth. The one God speaks, unlike these silent idols in Corinth. And when the Holy Spirit, when the one God speaks, he speaks through people. And you can tell whether it's the Holy Spirit speaking or not by what is said. So in verse 3, Paul says, "Therefore, I want you to understand that no one speaking by the Spirit of God ever says, 'Let Jesus be cursed.'" The Greek there is anathema Jesus. And no one can say Jesus is Lord, Kyrios Jesus, except by the Holy Spirit. Now, whether Paul is referring to what might be said to non-Christians, to those who worship at the temples, or by the other non-Christians in Corinth, something that they might say to those Christians to deny Jesus, or whether someone in the Corinthian church, perhaps in an ecstatic trance, said anathema Jesus, we don't really know. And we wonder, some scholars wonder, if maybe that did happen in the church, and because of their high esteem for the gift of tongues, maybe the people in Corinth weren't critical of someone who actually said anathema Jesus, let Jesus be cursed. We don't quite know. But we do know that what Paul says is when the Holy Spirit speaks, and when the Holy Spirit speaks, what is said is Jesus is Lord, and one can only say Jesus is Lord by the Holy Spirit. Now don't forget that Jesus is Lord, Kyrios, Jesus. It's not just not just a religious statement, it's a political statement as well. Kyrios is the title that the emperor, who claimed that he was divinely, that he was of divine lineage, used for himself. Caesar was called Kyrios, Lord. So to say, Kyrios Jesus, Jesus is Lord, was at the same time to say, the emperor is not. So the first thing that God does through the Holy Spirit, in contrast to the silent Corinthian idols, is God speaks. Now secondly, Paul moves to a second thing that the one God through the Holy Spirit does. God gives gifts that lead to ministries that have effects. In verse 4, Paul says, now, there are varieties of gifts, but the same Spirit. And there are varieties of services, but the same Lord. And there are varieties of activities, but it is the same God who activates all of them in everyone. Paul is continuing to contrast the polytheism of Corinth with all its temples and its variety of gods with the one God of Christianity. So in contrast to a person in Corinth who might make requests of various gods and various temples, what Paul is saying is that there are many gifts, many services, many activities. There's only one source, only one God from whom they are given. And he's talking about three things here. He says there are varieties of gifts. That's the first thing. He'll specify what those are a little bit later on. But those are things like wisdom and knowledge and faith and healing. It's the gift. And those gifts lead to a service. Now the word that he uses there for service can be translated also as ministry. So there's a gift that the people of the church of Corinth are given. And then there's a ministry, a way that that gift is used, that grows out of it. And that ministry that results from that gift has effects. Things happen because of it. But all of these gifts, ministries, and the effects of that ministry, they're all a result of the one God's working, the same Spirit. Unlike the polytheism of Corinth, where you see a different God in a different temple for different gifts, different things you might want, depending on what you're looking for. In Christianity, it's all the same. There are gifts, there are ministries, there are effects of those ministries. There's one source, the one God through the Holy Spirit. Now, what gifts are we talking about? Paul specifies in the next verses. To one is given through the Spirit the utterance of wisdom, to another the utterance of knowledge, according to the same Spirit, to another faith, by the same Spirit, to another gifts of healing, by the one Spirit. Do you think that's an important point for Paul to make, as he keeps making that point about the same God, the same Spirit, one Spirit, over and over again? To another, the working of miracles, to another prophecy, to another the discernment of spirits, to another various kinds of tongues, to another the interpretation of tongues. So these are the gifts that Paul specifies that are given by the one God. Now notice that Paul puts tongues last on the list. Why? I think it's because the church of Corinth was overly concerned with that particular gift. And so Paul is stressing, look, stop fixating on that gift, because there are lots of other ones. And first on the list, what does he put? He puts wisdom. The Greek word is sophia there. And knowledge, gnoseos. So that's first on his list, the gift of wisdom, gift of knowledge. What's the difference between wisdom and knowledge? Well, it's the difference. Knowledge is knowing that a tomato is a fruit. Wisdom is knowing that it doesn't go in a fruit salad. But again, Paul is saying that while there are lots of different gifts of the Spirit, it's the same one God, the same Spirit who gives them all. Wisdom, faith, healing, miracles, prophecy, discernment, tongues, and interpretation. Now, I skipped over a verse, if you noticed. Verse 7. Why are these gifts given? Paul says, to each is given the manifestation of the Spirit for the common good. First, let's notice those two words. To each. Not to a select few, not to many, not to most, not to some, but to each. Each and every member of the church at Corinth, and each and every member of the church today. To each. And these gifts are not located in a temple to a silent idol. No. Each and every member is given personally the manifestation of the Spirit. The gifts that lead to ministries that have effects. Why? For the common good. Not for our personal edification. Not to make us feel good about ourselves. Not to draw attention to ourselves. Not to say, look how good we are. Look at this talent I have, this thing I can do. Not to fulfill our potential, but for the common good. This is what the gifts of the Spirit are for. Tomorrow in the U.S. is Martin Luther King Day. This past week, Martin Luther King would have turned 90. That gifted activist and leader would have been 90 years old this last week. But I read these words that he spoke to an audience in Montgomery, Alabama in 1957 this week. And they're just as pertinent and inspiring today as they were then. He said, life's most pertinent and urgent question is, what are you doing for others? Here we see that Paul is in full agreement with Dr. King. To each is given the manifestation of the Spirit for the common good. Why are you given a gift that leads to ministry that results in effects? For the common good, for others. Life's most pertinent and urgent question is, what are you doing for others? So the second thing that God, the Holy Spirit, does, in contrast to those silent idols in the temples in Corinth, is God gives gifts that lead to ministries that have effects for the common good. Now finally, the last thing I want to mention that Paul points out that the one God through the Holy Spirit does is God activates. What does that mean? Now let's look at verses 6 and 11. In verse 6, Paul says, there are varieties of activities, but it's the same God who activates all of them in everyone. Then in verse 11, all of these are activated by the one and the same Spirit, who allots to each individually just as the Spirit chooses. Now, remember these activities. These are effects of a ministry that grows out of a gift that's given. So let's look at three words. First, the word for these activities, these effects that a ministry results in. That word is energematon, right? It is the word for effects, or results, or activities. Now the word for activities, the word for activates, the same God who activates. The word is energemon, all of them. Then in verse 11, all of these are activated, energe. Do you notice anything that these three words have in common? They all have the same root as the English word energy. Because the same Holy Spirit who bestows a gift out of which grows a ministry, energizes it, gives energy to that gift and to that ministry. So the same God, the same Spirit who gives the gift, energizes the result. So none of this, having a gift, a ministry, and effects, none of this is a result of our own efforts. The Holy Spirit gives the gift, and the Holy Spirit energizes the ministry and its results. So in contrast to the silent Olympian idols, God, through the Holy Spirit, speaks, gives gifts that lead to ministries that have effects for the common good, and activates those gifts, ministries, and effects. Paul is saying that spiritual gifts aren't simply our talents, aren't simply our skills. They are given by God to each of us. Not only are they given, they're empowered by God through the Holy Spirit. So we're not given a spiritual gift like a present that we might receive that doesn't have the batteries included. Have you ever gotten one of those or seen a kid at Christmas, get something that they really love, that they're really ready to use, and they look on the side of the box and it says, batteries not included. It's a pitiful thing. The Holy Spirit's gifts come with the batteries, the energy, the activation included. All we need to do is acknowledge the gift and allow the Holy Spirit to work through us. They're ready to use. But nothing is sadder than a gift that is given and remains unused. So Paul's words here are not just a description of where gifts come from and what they are. They're an admonition to use them. I don't usually give homework with my sermons, but today I am. I want to pass out to you a spiritual gift assessment tool that I would ask you this week to take a look at. Oh, thank you. To take a look at and prayerfully consider. And if you've never considered what your spiritual gifts are or might be, you'll find this an excellent exercise. If you already know, you'll find it a good refresher. What I'd like you to do is really, honestly, prayerfully think about what your spiritual gifts are. And not only what they are, but what ministry might arise out of them. And what effects might result from that ministry. And so if you look at the instructions there on the first page, the fifth one I think is the most important. Explore and discover your gifts as you use them in ministry, settings, or family life. Because nothing is sadder than an unused gift. Let's pray, please. Father, we give you praise that you not only give us spiritual gifts for ministry, but you give them freely to each and every member of the body of Christ. And none is more important than any other. But not only this, you empower us for that ministry and to see its results. We ask, Lord, that you would fill us with your breath, fill us with your Spirit, so that we might see the coming of your kingdom. We ask this in the name of your Son.
Amen. Remember, we have a board meeting just immediately after, and